My name is Lena Ashford. I'm a federal prosecutor. I investigate white-collar crimes, embezzlement, charity fraud, corruption in high places. I spend most of my days combing through sealed documents, questioning billionaires, and putting liars under oath. I've spent the last 10 years listening to people lie in expensive suits, but no lie ever hurt as much as the ones whispered in chiffon by someone who once called me sister. She mocked me in front of everyone, called me just admin at her engagement party. Her fiancé looked at me and asked, "What do you do again?" "Records filing." I looked him in the eye and gave him just one word: prosecutor. The room froze. Her friends dropped their forks. Her parents went pale. And for the first time in my life, my sister Natalie realized who I really was. But to understand that moment, you need to understand what came before it. 6 months earlier, I was sitting in my office reviewing a set of flagged transactions tied to an ongoing charity fraud investigation. The case had nothing to do with family, or so I thought, until I saw a familiar name buried deep in a list of secondary beneficiaries. Natalie Ashford, my sister. I blinked. Checked it again. It wasn't a coincidence. The birthday matched. So did the address she once shared on an old driver's license I had memorized by heart. I didn't jump to conclusions. That's not how I work. I flagged the name quietly, separated it from the primary case, started a silent inquiry. Natalie had been running giveaway campaigns on Instagram under the name Ashford Cares. Every campaign ended with a promise proceeds to charity, but the money didn't go to any registered nonprofit. Instead, it went to offshore accounts. The paper trail was slippery, but not invisible. Still, I didn't say anything. Not yet. Not until I had more. Then came the envelope. Ivory cardstock. Rose gold embossed edges. A wedding invitation. From Natalie. No note. No apology for the silence. No +1. Just a printed message that ended with "Try not to wear anything too serious." Okay, I sat with it in my hands for a long time. Long enough for the steam from my tea to disappear. Long enough to hear the old version of me whisper, "Don't go. You don't belong there." But I've built a life on showing up where I'm not wanted and staying anyway. So I made a decision, not because I wanted to celebrate her, but because I needed to know who she really was, and whether I was ready to act on what I'd found. I had already opened a quiet channel with Henry Locke, my most trusted field investigator. We agreed if I saw anything at that party that confirmed Natalie's knowledge or involvement, I'd give him the signal. If not, I'd leave without a word. Simple, clean, controlled. On the day of the engagement party, I arrived 10 minutes early and parked down the street. I watched as luxury cars rolled up the driveway of the rented estate, each one delivering another friend with flawless teeth and vacant eyes. I stepped out of my car, black dress, simple, fitted, no jewelry. The kind of outfit that said, "I'm not here to impress you, but I won't be ignored." Inside, the house glittered with curated excess. Glass sculptures, custom florals, a string quartet playing ironic pop covers. I walked in through the side hallway, no announcement, no red carpet. Marcy, Natalie's best friend, spotted me first. She smiled like someone trying to recall the name of a childhood dog. "Oh, you made it," she said. "That's a surprise." Still working that government admin thing, I didn't answer. Because the moment you say what you do in a room like that, people either disappear or pretend they never mocked you. But I hadn't come to be recognized. I came to listen. Natalie was glowing at the center of the room, white silk, perfect makeup, all charm. Grayson, her fiancé, looked exactly like his LinkedIn profile, pressed, polished, forgettable. He stood behind her like an accessory, nodding in rhythm to whatever she said. I stayed near the back, observing, until she saw me. Her smile faltered, just for a second, then reassembled like a puzzle she'd rehearsed. She walked over holding a champagne flute, like it was part of her costume. "Wow," she said. "Didn't think this was your thing." "It isn't," I said. "But sometimes I make exceptions." She glanced at my dress. Black. At an engagement party, I figured someone should ground the palate. She blinked, unsure if I was joking, then leaned in and said, "Just don't make things awkward, okay? Grayson's parents are big on appearances." I nodded, but said nothing, because I had already made my decision. I was going to finish what I started, but not in their way, in mine. And if Justice showed up in a black dress that night, it would be because someone invited her to the wrong party. People always said Natalie had something special. Your sister, they'd tell my parents she lights up a room. They never said what I did. Only that I was quiet, focused, too serious for my age. My mother used to say it like a compliment. She's not like Natalie. Lena's the type who'll go far. She just needs to loosen up. But that wasn't what I heard. What I heard was Natalie shines. You try. Natalie was magnetic. She always had a story, a smile, a way of turning mistakes into anecdotes and cruelty into charm. She got out of trouble with a well-timed pout. I got into trouble just by standing nearby. Our birthdays were 10 days apart. When I turned 12, they forgot mine. No balloons, no cake, no dinner. But when Natalie turned 11 the following week, there was a backyard party with fairy lights and handmade signs that spelled out her name. I remember watching from my bedroom window. The music played loud enough that I couldn't pretend I didn't notice. I stayed upstairs reading. Or maybe just pretending to. No one came up to check. I'm not saying I didn't get love. I got structure, boundaries, the kind of affection that looks like checking the report card before asking how your day was. Natalie got something else, something I didn't know how to name until much later. Attention. Undivided and unconditional. She made people want to listen. I made them want to move on. The first time she lied about me, I was 10. She had broken a vase in the living room. One of those glass ones my mom claimed came from some designer in Milan. I walked in 2 minutes later, just as the pieces were still sliding across the floor. She looked at me wide-eyed and said, "Lena did it." I laughed. I actually laughed. I thought she was joking. But my mother didn't. She stared at me disappointed, not angry, not confused, just disappointed. "You should take more care," she said. "Why were you playing inside?" I wasn't. I had just gotten home from the library, but Natalie was already crying, so of course that was the end of it. I remember standing there, hands clenched, and realizing that logic didn't matter. The truth didn't either. What mattered was who people wanted to believe. I stopped defending myself after that. Let them believe what they wanted. In school, teachers called me precocious. Natalie got personable. She ran for class president and won with jokes about cafeteria food. I won a regional essay contest, and no one mentioned it at dinner. Still, I didn't feel angry, not exactly, just separate. I learned early how to be invisible in a room full of noise, how to be still, how to watch. My father once told a guest Natalie she's got that spark. And Lena. Well, Lena's going to be the one who reads the fine print. Everyone laughed, even me, because I understood my role, the reliable one, the steady one, the one who never made a scene. I carried that role like a badge. Until one day I realized it looked more like a muzzle. But by then the habit had set in. People assumed I liked the background, that I didn't need applause or affirmation or even basic curiosity. They called it humility. I called it survival. Natalie never had to explain herself. She wore sequins in church, and no one blinked. I wore a navy turtleneck and got asked if I was in mourning. She could skip chores by saying she had cramps. I once had a fever of 101 and still had to vacuum. But again, I wasn't angry, or at least I didn't let myself be. Because what good would that have done? I was the serious one, the intense one, the girl with the too loud brain and the too quiet mouth. They said I'd make a great lawyer someday. They didn't say why. They didn't say it was because I already lived like I was on trial. By the time I turned 13, I had stopped expecting anyone to ask how my day went. Silence was easier. It didn't disappoint. It didn't interrupt. It didn't misunderstand. I came home, did my homework at the kitchen table, made my own dinner if no one remembered, and read, always read. Books didn't ask me to be charming. They just let me be there. My room was filled with paperbacks, highlighters, and sticky notes. My mother once joked that it looked like a supply closet. I laughed too. It was easier that way. Natalie called it the cave. She said it with a smile, teasing but not malicious. At least not on the surface. "You always look like you're preparing for a final exam," she said. Even in July, I probably was. I finished high school a year early. There wasn't a party, just a dinner where my father said, "Well done," and my mother added, "Don't forget to smile more when you get to college." Natalie didn't come. She had a social thing. When I got my acceptance letter from law school, I was sitting at the breakfast table. The envelope was thick, heavy, the kind that means something. I opened it slowly, methodically, like I'd rehearsed it. Full scholarship, early admission, Ivy League. I slid it across the table toward my parents. My mother skimmed it. My father nodded. That's impressive, he said like it was a grocery list. Natalie looked over my shoulder, popped a grape into her mouth, and said, "Guess you'll be single forever, huh? Who wants to marry someone who works that much?" She wasn't being cruel. Not exactly. She was just being Natalie. Light, breezy. The kind of person who could drop a stone into water and call it a ripple. I smiled. Or at least I think I did. It was the kind of moment that didn't need a response. Because in my family, achievement was expected but never celebrated. Not unless it sparkled. I didn't sparkle. I built things quietly. Law school was a different world. Professors who didn't care how you looked. Classrooms where the smartest voice won, not the loudest. I thrived there. I clerked for a federal judge before I was 25. Worked late nights that blurred into early mornings. Watched relationships crumble in my inbox texts. I didn't answer dates I forgot to confirm. But I didn't mind. That was the deal. Give up the spotlight to control the stage. Natalie, meanwhile, was bouncing between internships and boyfriends. She switched majors 3 times. Communications to marketing to strategic influence, whatever that meant. My mother still called her the social one. When Natalie got a job at a fashion agency, they threw a dinner. When I won my first federal conviction, I got a thumbs-up emoji. I didn't resent it. Resentment takes energy. And I had too much to do. Instead, I let the silence stretch. Let the gap between us widen until it felt like a landscape. She lived in a world of parties and promotions and photo filters. I lived in subpoenas and statutes. And honestly, it worked. We didn't fight, we didn't clash, we just existed. Like 2 planets in separate orbits, occasionally catching glimpses of each other through a telescope. Still, every few holidays, I came home. I sat through dinners where Natalie told stories about yoga retreats and influencer brunches. I nodded at tales of jet lag and brand deals. And when she asked what I'd been up to, I said things like, "Work's been steady," or "lots of reading." Because the truth felt too heavy to place between wine glasses and roasted vegetables. Sometimes I wondered what would happen if I told them. That I'd argued before appellate panels. That my name was cited in law journals. That defense attorneys dreaded seeing me walk into a courtroom. But I never did. Not because I wanted to be humble, but because I didn't want to hear Natalie say, "Wow, still so serious." That was her line. Always had been. And somehow it still worked. So I stayed quiet. Because silence had taught me how to listen. How to calculate the pause between a smirk and a sentence. How to wait until the noise died down. And then speak. Only once. But loud enough that no one would ever forget it. It started with a spreadsheet. I wasn't even supposed to be on that case. One of my colleagues had been pulled into a separate trial, so the folder landed on my desk like most things do, quietly without ceremony. The initial subject was a shell nonprofit flagged by the Treasury Department, Bellamy Children's Initiative. It had all the usual signs: vague mission statement, no listed board members, and bank statements that told a different story. I went through the files the way I always do. Line by line, number by number. There's a rhythm to it. A kind of silence I've come to rely on. But then I saw it. Buried in a list of outgoing transfers from one of the sub-accounts, routing number, recipient name, foreign bank address, was a familiar entry. Natalie Ashford. I stared at it for a moment like the text might rearrange itself. There was a transaction of $12,000, wired to a personal account in Zurich. The memo line said Media Strategy Consulting. I checked it again. Name, date of birth, last known address. It was her. For a moment I felt nothing, not shock, not fear, just a kind of clicking sound inside me, like something lining up. Then I did what I was trained to do. I opened a secondary file. I tagged the name. I made no assumptions. In this office, you don't accuse people you're related to. You separate, you isolate, you investigate without intention. So that's what I did. I pulled records from the past 18 months. Natalie had been running an Instagram series called Ashford Cares, short videos, donation links, promises of giveaways for every $20 gift to kids in need. She looked radiant on camera, humble, earnest. Her captions used phrases like community uplift and redefining impact. It was good branding, too good. The donations didn't trace back to any registered nonprofit. Instead, the funds flowed into a series of accounts linked to Bellamy Holdings. then funneled through Shellcore in the Caymans, before bouncing back to personal savings accounts across Europe and Nevada. One of those accounts had Natalie's name on it. Still, I told myself maybe she didn't know. Maybe she was recruited for marketing. Maybe she was another face in someone else's game. That happens. People get used. I told myself that. But the more I looked, the harder it became to believe. There were documents she'd signed, video scripts she'd submitted, emails with phrasing identical to the wire memos, the kind of patterns you can't ignore. I sat in my office for hours that night. The city outside blurred into glass reflections. My tea went cold. I kept thinking I'm still her sister. Even if I'm a prosecutor, I'm still her sister. But that's not how justice works. Justice doesn't bend for family. It doesn't flinch because someone once shared your bathroom mirror. And yet, beneath the logic, beneath the policies and guidelines, I felt something stir that I hadn't felt in a long time. Hesitation. Because this wasn't just a name on paper anymore. It was Natalie, my sister. The girl who used to steal my cereal and lie about it with a smile. The woman who'd grown into someone I no longer recognized but still couldn't ignore. I printed the transaction logs, laid them out in order, labeled the connections, annotated the flows. My hand didn't shake, but my chest did. I picked up the phone, called Henry Locke. He answered on the second ring. "Talk to me. I need a secondary review," I said. "Private. Off the record for now." There was a pause. "Who's the subject?" I hesitated. Just a second too long. Then I said it. My sister. To his credit, he didn't react. Didn't question. Just said understood and told me when we'd meet. After the call, I sat back. Looked at Natalie's smiling face on the campaign thumbnail. Eyes bright. Lips parted like she was mid-laugh. I didn't feel rage or betrayal. I felt something else. Like I was watching a storm roll in over water. You know it's coming. You just don't know how much it's going to take with it. I've built my life around rules. The ones written in statute. The ones carved into case precedent. And the unspoken ones that govern professional distance. But nothing in the rules prepares you for your sister's name on a federal case file. The night I confirmed the trail back to Natalie, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself that correlation didn't mean guilt. That maybe she'd been tricked. Maybe she thought it was real. Maybe someone used her. She's always been good at being seen. Maybe someone offered her a platform and fed her lines to read. Maybe she really believed she was doing good. I said maybe more times in my head that week than I had in the last 10 years combined. But prosecutors don't deal in maybes. We deal in patterns, in choices, in signatures and digital footprints. Still, I was her sister, even now. Even after all the slights and eye rolls and backhanded compliments. Even after being reduced to admin in front of people who didn't know the weight of my title. Even after years of silence, I was still her sister. And if there was even a 5% chance she didn't know what she was doing, I had to give her the benefit of the doubt. So I created a parallel folder. Off-network. No official case number. No internal notifications. I told myself I was doing it for objectivity, to avoid office gossip, to buy time. But deep down I know I was doing it because of something far less noble, because I didn't want her to find out the hard way, because I still wanted to believe there was some version of her that was innocent, not just legally, but personally. I set a rule for myself. I would only proceed if I found direct evidence that Natalie knew what she was doing, if I found language that showed intent, if I found confirmation that she benefited and understood where the money came from. Nothing short of that would justify moving forward. Until then, I'd wait, watch, document. Quietly, I told no one except Henry. And only the basics. He didn't push. Just said, "Call me when you're ready." The following day, I watched her newest video on Instagram. She stood in front of a mural downtown, speaking into the camera with flawless lighting and a soft piano track underneath. This month, we're working with Bellamy Foundation to provide meals and mentorship for underserved youth. She said, her voice warm. When you give, you're not just donating. You're investing in stories that deserve to be told. I paused the video. Bellamy Foundation. They'd scrubbed the word holdings out of everything. It was branding sleight of hand. It didn't prove guilt, but it didn't smell like innocence either. I clicked through her tagged posts. Dozens of influencers resharing, promoting the cause. And then I found it. A caption 3 weeks old. In partnership with Bellamy's international arm, we're scaling our impact abroad. More good to come. International arm. That was the name of one of the shell accounts, Bellamy International Initiative. Natalie had used the phrase verbatim. That wasn't marketing fluff. That was insider language. Not something pulled from a brief. Something someone says when they've sat in the meetings. When they've signed the deals. I stared at the screen. There it was, the shift. Not a smoking gun, but a sharp click in the pattern. She knew, maybe not every detail, maybe not how deep it went, but she knew enough to suspect, and she said nothing. I minimized the window, opened my encrypted folder, typed a single line at the top. Subject has demonstrated language consistent with operational knowledge. I saved it, locked the file. Then I sat back in my chair, letting the hum of the office wash over me. No tears, no anger, just a quiet acceptance. The kind that feels like snow falling inside your chest. I was still her sister, but I was also a prosecutor. And now I knew which one had to speak first. The envelope arrived on a Wednesday. Thin, glossy, deliberate. It didn't have my name handwritten on it. Just a printed label slightly misaligned. The kind of thing you get from a template. Mass-produced sentiment. I held it for a few seconds before opening it. It smelled like jasmine, but not the soft kind. The kind that lingers, loud, floral, insistent. It took me a moment to recognize it. Estée Lauder, my mother's favorite. The one she kept in the back of her vanity, only pulling it out for graduations, church, or family photos. Natalie used to sneak it out in high school, dab a little behind her ears before leaving for beauty pageants. She said it made her feel expensive. I was 12 when I first caught her doing it. She stood in the hallway mirror, one hand on her hip, one finger tapping the perfume bottle. She didn't know I was watching. I said, "Mom's going to smell that." She turned around, smiled like a secret. "Not if you don't say anything." I didn't. Because even then I knew the roles. Natalie sparkled. I stayed quiet. That perfume followed her into every hallway she walked through. It trailed behind her in school auditoriums, at debate tournaments she didn't actually compete in, at family dinners, where she showed up late, but still stole the spotlight. And now it followed her onto this envelope. I slipped a letter opener under the flap and sliced it clean. Inside was cardstock rose gold, foil cream background, perfect alignment. I'd seen enough wedding invitations to know it had been designed by someone paid far too much. Together with their families, it began, "Natalie Ashford and Grayson Bellamy invite you to celebrate their engagement." There was no mention of me. No line that said "my beloved sister," no warm insert with a personal note. Just the time, the date, the location. And at the bottom, in smaller text, formal attire encouraged. Please, no dark colors. There was no space for a +1. I ran my thumb along the edge of the card. Sharp, clean, like a verdict. I placed it down on the table, sat still. Across from me, the morning light hit the stack of case files I'd been reviewing before the mail arrived. Redactions, signatures, offshore wiring summaries, reality, truth, work that had weight. This card didn't feel like it belonged in the same room. But I didn't throw it away. Instead, I let it sit there, perfumed and proud. Because that was what Natalie wanted. To be seen. To be known. I leaned back in my chair and let my eyes close for a second. A memory surfaced, one I hadn't thought about in years. I was 16. I had gotten an invitation to a leadership summer camp at Georgetown. It was selective, hard to get. I'd written 4 essays and submitted 2 recommendation letters. The envelope had come while I was at school. When I got home, it was gone. I asked Natalie if she'd seen it. She was painting her toenails on the couch, TV blaring. She said, "You mean that boring legal thing?" I nodded. She didn't look up. "Oh, I think I tossed it. It looked like junk." Later that night, I found the shredded remains in the bottom of the kitchen trash. My name, half a logo. Nothing else legible. I never told our parents. Not because I didn't want to, but because I already knew what they'd say. Maybe it was a mistake. "You should be more careful with your mail." She probably didn't mean it. So I reapplied, got in again, went alone, and never brought another letter home. I opened my eyes and looked back at the engagement invitation. So this is what she sends now. Foiled lettering, stiff paper. A party for appearances, and I was being asked not to wear dark colors. Not to bring anyone, not to take up space. I folded the invitation once and placed it in the desk drawer with the rest of my active case files. Not under it, among it. Because whether Natalie knew it or not, this wasn't just another party. This was part of the case, and I would treat it as such. Still, as I closed the drawer, the scent of that jasmine perfume lingered on my fingers. I wiped my hand against my skirt. Not in anger, just instinct. Like brushing away something that didn't belong on me anymore. I didn't RSVP right away. I left the invitation in my drawer for 3 days. It sat between federal tax affidavits and a sealed file labeled internal, preliminary. Technically, it belonged to neither, but it didn't feel like a personal item either. Every time I opened that drawer, the scent of jasmine lifted slightly faint now, but still there. Persistent, like Natalie. On the 4th day I made the decision. I would go. Not to confront, not to grandstand, but to see, to watch her, to listen. Because until that point, everything I had was circumstantial. Wires, language, proximity. But the kind of knowledge Natalie had shown, the phrasing, the familiarity with Bellamy entities, suggested deeper involvement. And yet a part of me still whispered questions. Did she know what she was doing? Did she understand the pipeline behind those donations? Or had she been handed a script and trusted the people who gave it? I couldn't make a move until I knew. So I called Henry. He picked up before the second ring. "Yeah, I'm going to the engagement party," I said. There was a pause. Then, "You want backup?" "Not inside," I said. "Just eyes nearby, unmarked, no contact unless I signal." Henry didn't ask why. He knew better than to assume I'd make this personal. I gave him the location, time, shared the dress code so he'd blend in if needed. He grunted. "Haven't worn a blazer since my divorce. If you still have the shoes," I said, "that'll be enough." He laughed just a little, and then, "What's the threshold?" I hesitated. "If I see evidence of intent," I said. "If she says anything that confirms knowledge. Then you move, you serve, quietly. And if she doesn't, then I'll leave." No ripple. He didn't ask what kind of evidence I expected. He didn't remind me that verbal confirmation wouldn't be enough to prosecute. That wasn't the point. The point was clarity. I wasn't building a case yet. I was building certainty. After the call, I stood at my bedroom closet for almost 20 minutes. Not because I didn't have anything to wear, but because I wanted something that made no statement and also quietly every statement. I chose black, tailored, sleek, no embellishment. A dress that belonged nowhere in particular but wouldn't look out of place anywhere. The next morning, I packed light. Single carry-on, no laptop. Just my phone, a notebook, and a flash drive, holding the encrypted case file. I booked my own hotel, refused the one Natalie listed on the invitation. She'd included a discount code under friends and family. I didn't qualify as either. The night before the flight, I stood by my living room window with a cup of tea. The city moved below, honking, buzzing, oblivious. I tried to imagine what she'd say when she saw me. Surprise, annoyance. A joke about how I never come to things. I rehearsed responses in my head. Then deleted them. I didn't need to plan what to say. I just needed to be ready for what I might hear. I opened my notebook, wrote a single sentence. If she lies in a room full of people who believe her, it means nothing. But if she lies knowing I'm watching, then it means everything. That would be my measure, because I knew Natalie. I knew her rhythms, her performance tics. The way her eyes flicked when she was covering something. She could fool a crowd, but she couldn't fool me. Before I went to bed, I opened the drawer again. The invitation was still there. Soft edges curled slightly from air exposure. The scent had almost faded. Almost. I held the card up to my nose one more time. And then, without quite knowing why, I slipped it into my carry-on. Not as a guest pass. As evidence, not of a crime, but of something older. Something perfumed and sharp and deeply familiar. I arrived 5 minutes early. Not more, not less. That's always been my number, enough to be punctual, not eager. Enough to be noticed, not discussed. The estate sat on a hilltop with trimmed hedges and string lights that looked like someone had draped constellations across the lawn. The valet took my key without meeting my eyes. Inside, the house was humming. Crystal glasses clinked. Soft jazz from a quartet floated through the air like perfume. Waitstaff in black vests moved like shadows between groups of people in pastel suits and sequined gowns. I stood at the edge of the room for a long moment. letting my eyes adjust. Natalie stood near the fireplace, surrounded by a ring of admirers. Her dress shimmered in champagne silk. Her laugh was loud enough to command attention, but soft enough to suggest modesty. When she saw me, her smile paused, just for a breath, then returned with twice the wattage. She walked over, arms out like we were old friends instead of something more complicated. "Lena," she said, air kissing near my cheek. "I didn't think you'd make it. You invited me," I said calmly. She laughed. "Sure, but you never come to these things. I figured you were too busy with whatever it is you do." "I made time," I said. She glanced at my dress, black, unembellished, and her eyes lingered a moment too long. "Well," she said, "bold choice for a celebration." "Someone has to balance the color palette," I said. She blinked, unsure if it was a joke. Before she could respond, Grayson joined us, tall, polished, his smile set to default. "This must be the famous sister," he said. I said nothing. Natalie placed a hand on his arm. "Lena, this is Grayson, Lena, my older sister. She's very serious." Grayson extended a hand. I shook it. Firm, brief. "Natalie says you work in government," he asked. "Something in records." I looked at him. Not unkindly, not sharply, just clearly. "I prosecute federal crimes." He blinked. "Like, as a lawyer?" "As a federal prosecutor," I said. The space around us grew quieter. Conversations near us faltered. A fork clinked against glass somewhere behind Grayson's shoulder. Someone whispered, "Ashford." Wasn't she on the Renko case? Natalie let out a soft laugh. The kind people use when they're trying to regain control. "Well, there you go," she said. Still so serious. Then she leaned in just a fraction. "Enough for only me to hear, but maybe don't mention work too much tonight. People are here to celebrate, not get audited." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The damage had already shifted. The air had changed, and Natalie knew it. Later, as dinner plates were cleared and wine flowed more freely, she took the microphone. "Before we bring out dessert," she said, "I just want to say thank you to everyone who came tonight. It means so much to Grayson and me." The room applauded politely. She continued. "As most of you know, I wasn't always this put together," she said, smiling. "Growing up, I was the wild one. My sister Lena was, well, the opposite. She once filed a formal complaint because I borrowed her sweater without asking." Laughter. "She was always like that," Natalie said, waving her hand lightly. "Judgy, rigid. But we love her anyway." Her eyes found mine across the room, and she winked. Grayson, seated next to her, chuckled. But seriously, he added, lifting his glass, "We're lucky she made it." "Natalie said you work in—" What was it again? "County admin." I set my wine glass down. "I prosecute federal crimes," I said. The room fell into silence again, this time heavier, thicker. Grayson shifted. "Oh, wow. That's serious stuff." "Yes," I said. "It is." Natalie's smile faltered. I didn't gloat. I didn't stand. I just held her gaze and said softly enough that only our table heard, "I'm not the one who made this serious." Then I turned to my plate and picked up my fork. Not because I was hungry, but because I wanted them to see what calm looked like after the truth had entered the room. I didn't give the signal right away. I waited. Let the silence bloom like a bruise across the room. Let the laughter from Natalie's speech fizzle into a thick, confused quiet. Grayson stared at me, one hand still on his wine glass, the other resting on Natalie's arm. But I watched the way his fingers shifted, how they hovered just above her skin now, not quite touching. Across the room, Dale Bellamy had straightened in his seat, his jaw set, his eyes narrow, calculating. And Natalie, she was blinking faster than usual. Her smile flickered, reset, and then tried again. But the warmth was gone. I picked up my cloth napkin and dabbed the corner of my mouth. Then I turned just slightly, just enough to meet Henry's eye across the room, and gave the smallest nod. He moved like mist, suit pressed, no name tag, no visible badge, but the kind of presence that silences a room by existing. He stepped between tables with calm, practiced confidence. People looked up, unsure whether to smile or shrink. Some did both. When he reached Natalie, he stopped, unfolded a sealed envelope, and spoke clearly. "Natalie Ashford." He said, "You are being served a federal subpoena related to your participation in wire fraud, misrepresentation of charitable funds, and the use of public donations to facilitate illegal transfers through shell corporations. He laid the envelope gently on the table. Someone gasped. Natalie didn't move. She stared at the envelope like it was a foreign object, like it might disappear if she blinked long enough. Grayson stood slowly. His hand left her arm. He didn't say a word, just stepped back as if putting distance might make the document less real. "Natalie," he asked, but it wasn't a question, it was a warning. Her mouth opened, closed. Nothing came out. Dale Bellamy rose to his feet. Not dramatically, just enough to show he wasn't part of this. His eyes met mine. There was recognition there, and something else. Resentment, maybe, or fear. He didn't speak, didn't object. Because he knew. And in that silence, the rest of the room caught up. Chairs shifted. Forks dropped. Phones slid discreetly out of purses. And then softly behind me a voice said, "She's Lena Ashford." I turned just enough to see Marcy backing away. Her hand was at her mouth like she was physically trying to keep her voice from going louder. "She did the Renko case," she whispered. "I saw it on CNN." The name moved like current through the room. Ashford. Federal prosecutor. Renko. I stayed seated, still, calm, hands folded in my lap. Natalie finally found her voice, but it cracked on the first word. "You," she stammered. "You planned this. You came here to embarrass me." "No," I said quietly. "I came here to see if you would lie again. In a room full of people who trust you." She shook her head. "You couldn't have done this at another time in private." "You didn't steal in private," I said. The words weren't loud, but they were final. Grayson turned to her. "Is it true?" His voice was cold now, measured. The kind of tone I'd heard from judges, from jurors, from victims. Natalie didn't answer, couldn't. She just looked at me, her eyes searching for the version of me that used to stay quiet. The version she could dismiss, diminish, ignore. But that version didn't come to the party. I stood. Slowly, carefully. Folded my napkin and set it beside my plate. Then I looked at her one last time. "This didn't happen because I brought it here," I said. "It happened because you did." And then I walked away, not with triumph, not with revenge, but with the calm that comes from telling the truth, out loud, to people who never cared enough to ask. Natalie stood frozen, one hand still hovering near the envelope, as if it might leap off the table and vanish on its own. "No," she said finally. "No, you don't get to do this. You don't get to ruin everything because you're still bitter." Her voice was higher now, sharper, less polished. "You were always jealous of me," she went on. "Always watching, always judging. I knew this would happen the moment I invited you. I didn't flinch, didn't move." She pointed at me now, voice cracking. "This is payback, isn't it? You wanted to humiliate me. You wanted to feel important just once." I looked at her, calm, still. "I don't need payback," I said. "I already have something you never cared about." She blinked. Integrity. The silence in the room deepened. It wasn't shock anymore. It was consequence. Across the room, someone cleared their throat. A few people quietly stepped away. A waiter backed out of the room with a tray still full. Natalie turned to our parents. "Are you really just gonna let her do this?" she said. "Say something." Our mother looked pale. She stood slowly clutching her clutch bag like it might ground her. I don't understand," she said. "Lena, is this true?" I didn't answer her. I looked to my father. He hadn't stood. But he was sitting forward now, hands clasped, brow tight. "Lena," he said softly, "is this something we can fix?" As if this were a scheduling error, a family squabble, a wedding glitch. "Fix," I echoed. He nodded. "It's just, maybe we could talk about this, in private, before anyone else finds out." Anyone else. As if the room wasn't already full of eyes. I stared at him, at both of them. Two people who had stood beside Natalie at 100 dinners, 100 birthdays, who'd bought her dresses and paid for failed internships, and reposted her travel photos with captions like, "So proud of our shining star." People who had looked at me like I was a piece of furniture with credentials. And still, I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I said with the calm of someone long past the need for permission, "For years I never asked you for anything. Not attention, not approval, not even a fair shake. I turned my gaze to Natalie, and definitely not credit. My voice didn't rise, it didn't need to. But I'm not here as your daughter, or your sister, or anyone's second choice. I took a step forward, not toward them, just toward the truth. I'm here because someone broke the law, I said. And I'm the one whose job it is to answer to that. My mother sat back down. Her hand trembled slightly as she pulled out her phone. I saw her thumb hesitate above the screen. A message half-typed and abandoned. Natalie opened her mouth again. But whatever was about to come out, rage, pleading a weak excuse, it never landed. I held up one hand. Slight. Gentle, don't I said. You've said enough. Grayson had drifted further away. He wasn't touching her anymore. Wasn't even looking at her. His posture had changed, no longer the polished host, but something cooler, distanced. He whispered something to his father. Dale nodded once. Natalie saw it. And for the first time I saw the performance slip entirely. The panic didn't look theatrical now. It looked real, but I didn't step in. This wasn't my stage. I had done my part. She turned to me again. Desperate. Lena, please. We're family. I nodded. Just once. We are, I said. Which is why I gave you more chances than anyone else would have. She stepped forward like she might reach for me, but I took a step back. Not out of fear, but to set the line that should have been there long ago. You want this to be about revenge, I said, so you don't have to face what you did. I leaned in slightly, my voice barely above a whisper. But this wasn't about what you did to me. I pointed to the subpoena still lying untouched on the table. It's about what you did to everyone who trusted you. Her mouth opened again, but I was already turning away, not storming out, not demanding applause, just leaving. One step after the next, each one quieter than the last. Behind me, no one called out. No one asked me to stay. Because even they knew, whether they would admit it or not, that this wasn't the beginning of a family fight. It was the end of a long silence. And for once, I was the one holding the microphone. I didn't wait for someone to stop me. No one did. Not my parents. Not Natalie. Not even the people who just minutes ago had been clinking glasses and offering toasts under chandeliers the size of small cars. I walked through the hallway with my shoulders upright and my eyes calm. The same way I had walked through courtroom corridors. The same way I'd walked into job interviews with people who didn't think I belonged there. The same way I had walked through life quietly, deliberately, alone. Outside, the air was cooler than I expected. A breeze brushed against my face. It smelled faintly of white flowers and champagne. But beneath it, something else familiar and crisp, like the end of summer. A leaf still golden spiraled down and landed at the toe of my heel. I didn't move, just looked at it. And in the quiet of that moment, a single thought surfaced. I always walked alone. From classrooms to courtrooms. From birthdays to graduations. Even through grief. Not because I wanted to, but because I learned early that asking for company meant inviting disappointment. Still, tonight felt different. Not because I was lonelier, but because for once I wasn't lost in the silence. I was choosing it. My phone buzzed. I didn't even glance at the screen. Buzz. Then again. I pulled it out slowly, more out of habit than urgency. The first name, Mom. The message preview, Lena, please. I didn't read the rest. The second name, Natalie. No preview. Just her name. Just her number. I locked the screen. Put the phone back in my coat pocket. Let the buzzing fade. Not because I was angry, but because some conversations no longer needed answers. I kept walking. The valet looked up, startled. Do you need? No, I said. I'm fine. And I was. I didn't need a ride. Didn't need a speech. Didn't need validation. I just needed space. And for once it was mine. I walked 2 blocks to the edge of the neighborhood before hailing a car. The ride home was quiet. The driver didn't speak, and I didn't fill the silence. The city slipped past the window like a muted film, lights flickering, buildings standing tall in their nighttime suits. When I got home, the hallway was dark. No welcome light, no music. Just the low hum of the refrigerator and the familiar groan of floorboards under careful steps. I changed out of the dress, hung it back up with steady hands, then walked into the kitchen, boiled water. Reached for the old tin of jasmine tea I kept at the back of the cabinet. The smell rose like memory. I poured the water, let the leaves steep. sat down at the kitchen table, the same one where I used to do homework while Natalie danced through the living room in new shoes. The same table where once I had read my law school acceptance letter alone, then folded it shut when no one asked what it said. I didn't cry, didn't smile either. I just sat there, breathing, steady, still. A wind brushed past the windows. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed once and faded. The tea was ready. I poured it gently, watching the steam curl and dissolve. No toast, no reflection, just presence. There's a kind of peace that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't knock. It just arrives when the noise is gone. Tonight that peace sat with me, not because I had won, not because they had lost, but because I had spoken and didn't flinch. Because for the first time my silence had not been a shield. It had been a choice. I wrapped my hands around the warm ceramic, closed my eyes, and let the quiet do what it always did best, hold me without asking questions. A few weeks passed. I didn't count them, just let the days move on quietly like they always had. I still got up at 6, still took my tea with Jasmine, still walked to work in low heels and a pressed coat blending into the rhythm of the city. The world didn't change, not for me, and I didn't expect it to. But then one morning a letter came in the mail. Not email, not a message. An envelope, handwritten, soft cursive. My mother's. I stared at it for a moment before opening it. The letter was short, fewer than 100 words. Lena, I don't know where to begin. I thought you were always the strong one, so I didn't think you needed anything. That's not an excuse, just a mother's mistake. I'm sorry. Love, Mom. She had underlined the word sorry. It didn't undo anything, didn't change years of silence or misrecognition. But I folded the letter neatly, tucked it into my desk drawer under the birth certificate copies and old law licenses. A week later, an email came in. Subject line, I know I can't undo it. Natalie, I hesitated. Then clicked. Lena, I've started working with a lawyer. I don't know how deep I was in or how blind. But I know I crossed the line. I'm not asking for forgiveness. But if someday you feel like talking, I'll listen. I promise I'll listen. Natalie. No perfume on the screen. No dramatic signature. Just typed words. Direct. Almost small. I read the message once, then once more. Not for closure, not for guilt. But because some part of me needed to witness it, I printed it, folded it with precision, and placed it in a folder labeled Personal. The same folder that held my first case notes, the letter from my professor at Yale, a faded picture of me age 15, holding a library card like it was a passport. I didn't cry, didn't write back, didn't delete it either. Because some things don't need answers. Some acknowledgments live best in paper. That night I sat at my desk. No music, no distractions. Just the soft ticking of the wall clock and the warm glow of a desk lamp. Outside the city moved without me. Inside I exhaled. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something. Not an apology, not a reunion, not even recognition. I had already been seen by the only witness who mattered. Me. I looked at the folders stacked on my shelves. Renko, Braverton, Elridge Trust, Bellamy, all names, all cases, all weight. But they had one signature in common. Mine. Every motion filed, every argument made, every decision drawn with care and grit, not with fanfare, not with applause, but with precision and presence. I never needed anyone to say my name, because I had written it, etched it into courtroom transcripts, typed it at the bottom of briefs, stamped it into decisions that shaped outcomes, not loudly, not publicly, but powerfully. My voice had always been there in every conviction, every ruling, every quiet sentence that moved justice a little closer. I didn't grow up hearing praise, didn't grow up hearing my name at dinner tables or photo walls. But now I say it with my work, with my walk, with the silence that follows when I enter a room and they recognize the stillness is not absence, but control. My name is Lena Ashford, and I am not just anything. I'm not just the sister, not just the quiet one, not just the woman in the corner. I am the verdict, and I still have more to write. Before we say goodbye, can we ask you something? Where are you listening from today? Is it a quiet morning with sunlight pouring through your kitchen window? Or a late night when stories like this echo in the silence? Drop a comment below. We read every single one. Your voice matters here. And if this story resonated with you, not just as a tale of justice, but as a journey of quiet strength, consider subscribing to our channel, not just to hear more stories like this, but to stand with a community that still believes in dignity and self-worth, and in the kind of power that doesn't shout. Thank you for being here, for choosing to spend this time with us. And wherever you are in a busy city or a still corner of the world, we hope you carry Lena's story with you. Because sometimes, the most powerful name isn't the one others give you. It's the one you claim for yourself silently, with every step you take forward. Take care, and we'll see you in the next story.